So today is the start of a brand new vlog TBR thing. I don't know what just happened. Even though the rock and roll thing is not my favorite so far, I am enjoying it. Weird as it sounds, I am. The moral of the story is I am enjoying it, but I can't tell you why. Not because it's a spoiler, but because I genuinely cannot pinpoint what specifically I'm enjoying about this. Do I even know my own reading tastes? I don't know anymore. Hi everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with books I really shouldn't like, but I'm gonna try them anyway. So today is the start of a new secret TBR vlog of sorts, and these are books that I shouldn't like. So I've got 4 books picked out for this video that there's something in them that is usually one that I'm just like, oh no, that's part of it, I'm out, because I usually don't like that kind of thing, but there's something in it that really, really intrigues me. So I have picked out 4, like I mentioned, and I'm gonna go through them really quickly. So, the first one, the only one that I own, the one that started out this whole daggum thing, is this big boy, and that is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I mean, I knew it was big, but y'all, I thought it was going to be thick, but the same size as like a normal paperback, like the ACOTAR books are, but no, it's the size of the hardback. And it's thick, but it's only like 800 or so pages. Like, it's really, yeah. What is this? This is the, like, glossary of sorts. Starts on page 805. But I don't know a whole lot about this. I have read something by this author before, so I want to give it a chance. I am terrified of big-ass adult high fantasies. They scare the crap out of me. Like, first off, not only is it a very large book, I've got an audiobook for it, it's ready to go, so I'm not as terrified of the size as I would initially. The biggest thing is the fact that it is an adult high fantasy, because adult high fantasy worlds are way too complex for my brain to process sometimes, so I try to steer clear of a lot of Sanderson books. Like, I did try giving him a chance at one point, but I don't know, there's just a lot there that that's not my thing. But this takes place in a world where it's a matriarchy, and that fascinates me. So actually it was a video that Becca from Becca and the Books did. Something she said in a video where she was talking about why she didn't like it clicked with me, and I was like, I must read that. So it's been on my TBR ever since. It's huge. I'm terrified. This is probably gonna be, it's definitely not gonna be the first one that I start, but it might be the second one. I don't want to leave it to last because it's so big, but we'll see. But yeah, so I picked this one up because I do think it's gonna be one that I will enjoy parts of. I'm not sure, but I want to give it a chance. Like, I want to know. And then we also have The Antidote For Everything, which is by Kimmery Martin, and this one is on this list because it's about something medical, and I really, really don't like books that are set in like a medical setting. Our main character's a doctor, something like that, because I am crazy squeamish when it comes to blood and surgery, and particularly sharp objects like needles, just all of that in general. No, that's not for me. But it's about trans rights and medicine, and it follows 2 best friends who are, I believe, surgeons, and one of them is gay and one of them is straight, and it takes place, and I believe it has to be like a private practice, I think. I might be wrong about that, but the medical place that they work basically says, we're not going to treat trans people, and the gay guy is like, no, and continues to do it, and then I think he gets fired because of that, and then our main character, I think, tries to be a good ally and ends up being a really not great ally, and I don't know, just that conflict of that conversation, especially revolving around medicine, I think will be really interesting. I think it'll be really good to show, like, what good versus bad allyship looks like. So I'm really interested in all of the, like, social commentary and things like that. That's going to go into this, but they're about surgeons, and that's where I'm hesitant, is the surgery. Is it gonna be too much for me? I don't know. The next one is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I adored The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by this author. I thought it was so good. And I've heard that like this Seven Husbands and Daisy Jones are like the two of her best works, but it's about a rock star, like a rock band kind of thing. And I really don't like books about rock band, especially when it revolves around drugs and alcohol, like kind of that negative side of things. But it's Taylor Jenkins Reid. And also I've heard, because it's kind of set in like an interview style, so it's more like mixed media, I guess is what I'm looking for. So I'm curious about this one. I do actually have the audiobook from my library, so this is the one that I'm going to probably do a little bit later this month. It'll be the first one that I read, because I want to give it a shot, because I love this author and I want to see what everyone, like why everyone's obsessed with this book. But rock stars, I really don't like rock stars. So that's my struggle with that one. And then the very last one is Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. And this is purely because it's a Western. I really don't like Western books. But this one I believe is about women's rights. So I think I'm going to give it a chance because, again, I think it's gonna, I don't really remember what this is about. But I do know like it follows this girl or woman who like, there's like this band of women, but they're librarians, but they have like prohibited material because they're all like women's rights material or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but just something about that sounds really interesting to me. Also the fact that it's tiny, I'm willing to give it a chance, because if it was much bigger, I probably wouldn't give it a chance, because again, Westerns are not my thing. So those are the 4 books that I am going to try to tackle in this video. I don't know how long it's going to take. I hope you guys enjoy this video. I'll chapter it down below if there's a specific section that you'd like to check out, or a specific book that you'd like to check out. I'll make sure I do that. But yeah, I'm gonna see if these are for me, because like there's just something about each of these that is, you know, like it won't let me let the book go completely. There's just something that wants me to read them. So we're gonna give them a try, but I'll come back to you when I've started Daisy Jones. I feel like that one's I'm gonna start it and then like immediately finish it within like a couple of days, because, well, A, audiobook, but B, also mixed media. So I'll let you know when I start that. I am, I think, like 100 pages in. I picked this up from the library this past weekend. I don't know what part, but the Numbers tour is where I'm at. 100 pages, exactly. Look at me. And I'm really liking it. So I just, like, there's a lot of things about this, because the whole rock and roll thing, like I mentioned at the beginning, the whole rock and roll thing, the whole, like, you know, being in a band in the 70s and all you do is you drink and you do drugs and you have groupies, and like all of that is not at all appealing to me. But there's something about her writing that makes me very interested. And I've heard a lot of people say that this is something that you can very easily forget that it's not a real person, which is how I felt when I was reading The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And that's very true for this book. I do have the audiobook, which I've heard is the best way to go about this. And so far I would agree. I think it's fantastic. It's full cast recording. And they just have a way of not just reading you what's in this book, but actually like pausing when you're supposed to be pausing in a sentence. Like someone would be saying something and like they might pause halfway through to think about what they're saying, and they have those. They might sigh in between like lines. It just feels very realistic. And this book is kind of presented as the author, not Taylor Jenkins Reid, whoever the actual author is. This is presented as a like complete history of Daisy Jones and the Six and their kind of collaboration, which where I'm at is kind of right about that time is when they started collaborating together, and the downfall, like kind of what broke them up. And it's presented in a way that like we're never going to get the full story, but here are like audio snippets that we've collected throughout the years to present this story. And I find that so fascinating, just like the way that she's put this together and written this, and the way that they've been able to like make the audiobook. It's incredible. But I really enjoyed my time so far. And all I want to do is sit down and read this book, which is problematic because I have lots of things that I need to do this week. But it's really grabbing my attention, and I thought out of all the books that I have in this video, I thought this one was the most likely to grab my attention because I've enjoyed things by this author before. and a lot of people say that this one and Evelyn Hugo are her two best works. So I'm enjoying my time. It's weird. I think it's because it's in this like mixed media kind of format, because it's literally just like a bunch of people. It's kind of presented, if you're just reading it, I feel like it's presented in a way that you could literally just pretend like this is an interview with all of these people, but the audio presents it in a way that like these are all like audio clips separately that the author has put together. And I just think that's really fascinating. I like the way that she has put this together, and I don't know, I'm kind of invested, even though like I don't care about the whole rock and roll thing. So I'm curious to see where we could go from here, because like I said, we've kind of learned a little bit so far about Daisy Jones and the Six separately, and how they came to be where they are, how they came to be part of the music industry, how they started working at the publisher, because, not publisher, at the recording studio, because that's how they end up getting teamed up together, is I think they both are at the same recording studio. And now we're at the point where they've had their first song together, and kind of where we're going to go from there. I don't know, but I'm interested. So I could definitely see myself finishing this tomorrow or the day after, because I'm invested. So yeah, even though the rock and roll thing is not my favorite so far, I am enjoying it. It's happening. I'm reading it and I'm enjoying it. Who would have thought? Not me. I finished Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and it was amazing. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. There was just something, I don't really know what it was, but there was just something that wouldn't let me give it the full 5, but it was super good. Having read this, I think out of this one and Evelyn Hugo, I still prefer Evelyn Hugo. I don't know, there's just something about the like drug addiction lifestyle that does not appeal to me as far as reading. But with all of that being said, this was still a really, really good book. I liked this way more than I thought I would. I don't know how Taylor Jenkins Reid does this, because like I felt the same way about Evelyn Hugo when I was reading. This felt like a real band, it felt like real people, and this book just follows these 7 people. Well, actually more than that, because like it follows one of the band members' wives, and like the producer and the manager of the group, and like a bunch of other people here and there, but it mainly follows this band of, well, 6 people and then Daisy Jones, so like 7, and they are just a chaotic mess. Like that's the best way I can describe them, is they are just a hot mess, and I think that's why they're so believable. I went down a rabbit hole, and I think, if I am correct, now I might be wrong, this might be the wrong source, but I think this book was inspired by Fleetwood Mac, and I don't know a whole lot about that, but that was a band in the 70s. This is a band of sorts in the 70s, and it was just, I don't know, like it was just really believable because of the hot messes these people were. And then at the end there was like this twist. I mean, well, it wasn't really a twist, reveal of sorts maybe, that like was really shocking and surprised me beyond belief, but didn't take away from the story at all. It actually kind of added a layer to it, and I this close to crying at the end of this book. There were just a couple of things, like there's that thing that I can never say because it's a spoiler, but there's a very specific thing that happens in books, and no matter what it is, if that's what's happening, I will cry. And that was what happened at the end of this book, kind of. And so like, tears. Oh, it was good. It was very good. So, not surprised I enjoyed this one. I am also not surprised that this didn't get a full 5 stars, because like a lot of the middle, I felt like there were things happening, but I wasn't as interested in their lives as like some of the other stories. And again, I think it's that whole rocker band situation. Although I will say a lot of this book is not about them like necessarily on tour being like the rock stars with groupies and stuff like that. Like, that's definitely a part of it, but a lot of this book followed Daisy Jones and kind of the lead guy from the Six, Billy, and it followed them because they're both songwriters and they collaborated on this album, and this book primarily follows that album. I mean, you had to have a lot at the beginning to kind of preface Daisy's life and career up to a certain point, and then the Six's life and career up to a certain point, and then once they actually got together to do something, that's when the story really started. But it mostly focuses on the two of them writing this album and putting this album out there. Not just them, but like the rest of the band, but they were obviously the primary focus, and that's not what I expected from this book. I expected there to be some sort of ridiculous, big, dramatic thing that happened, because of course they're a band, of course big dramatic things are going to happen. And while there were a couple of big dramatic moments, it just felt right, you know. I don't know how to say this without spoiling it. I liked it, okay? I liked it. I'm glad I've read it, because now I can say that I've read it, and like, it is good. So if you like those types of things, I think it's definitely a more human look at rock bands, whereas most times you see a very, not necessarily a truthful look. And even though this was a fictional story, I thought it was presented very well. I liked the mixed media format of it. I thought it worked really well for the story that this author was trying to tell. Audiobook was top notch because it was a full cast, and not just like a full cast, like every single person was different. Like, there was little bits in here from like music critics, and those were different voices, and like little things here and there, and like the author of this book would pop in occasionally, and so like that would be a different voice. But like everybody, like, it probably had like 20 people, if not more, on the cast of this, and so it was very, very well done. I highly recommend, if you're interested in this book, to go the audiobook route. If you can do the audiobook and physically read at the same time, that would be my biggest suggestion as to how to consume this, because while the audiobook was incredible, they didn't always tell you like the name and then what they said, because it felt more, the flow felt better to not do that, because after a while you did start to recognize voices. But then if like someone had been gone for a chapter or so and now is back, then they would say their name to kind of remind you who they were. But then after a while, like, some of the voices would get muddled, and so if you weren't paying attention, it could very easily, you couldn't figure out who was saying what. So if you can read the book while you listen to the audiobook, because it does has everybody's name on every single line that they say, so you can follow along really well. The first one of this video is done, and it was a success, and I was actually interested. This was, again, like I said at the beginning of, I think the last time I talked to you, that this was the one that I was the most sure I was going to like because of the author. Honestly, anything above a 3.5 I'm going to consider a success in this video, because I don't know what the other ones are going to be. First one in this video was a success, and I'm actually shocked I liked it as much as I did, even with this author. Do I even know my own reading tastes? I don't know anymore. Hello. It is much later than when I came to you last for this vlog. It's probably been, I think like a year or two. It's been a hot second. So, we're here, and we're gonna finish this freaking vlog this month, I swear. So, I'm here to kind of tell you, in just a quick little update to let you know that I'm about to start the next book for this experiment, which is, I've already forgotten, The Antidote to Everything, that one. And I can't remember how much I told you at the beginning about what this book is about. I don't know a whole lot, so I am going to start it, and then I'll come to you halfway through and maybe give you a better idea of what it's about. But the reason it's in this video is because it involves medical things. I can't remember if the main characters are surgeons or, I was going to say just doctors, but that sounds bad. Like, they're doctors, but for some reason I have it in my head that they're specifically surgeons, which makes the medical grossness in my head 1,000 times worse. But I am excited to see how it's going to be based on what the story is about, which is more, it follows more like socially and what medical professionals are willing to do and for like trans people. And so I feel like we're not going to get a whole lot of like actual medical descriptions, but I might be wrong. So we might be very squeamish in this video, or this section, I don't know. But I'm diving back into the project with not the longest book. I thought about doing the longest book next, but I've decided not to do that. I decided to kind of ease back in with this one. And it's not too long. I feel like it's only like 300 pages or so. I don't have a physical copy of this. My library doesn't have it. So I do have the audiobook and I do have the ebook from my library, but I don't remember how long it is, but I'm about to head out the door and I'm thinking about starting this in the car. I just finished my most recent read, so I will pick this up sometime today. So I wanted to come to tell you that that was the next book that I'm choosing. So just so that I, can start it. And then I'll come back to you maybe in a day or two when I have actually started it and have a real idea of what this book's actually about. So this is it. I'm back. We're starting. We're doing this vlog, dang it. And yeah, I'll let you know what I think. I am 53, according to my Kindle, 53% of the way through this book. I just finished. This book is separated into 3 parts, and I'm just about to start the 3rd part. So it's a big chunk of the book. So I was so worried because I said, like, I thought about the surgery elements of this story, and I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? Maybe it won't be too bad. The book literally started with a surgery, but it wasn't descriptive. The way that the medical elements of the story are described, it's very like logical and scientific the way that it's looked at, because like I said, it started with a surgery. She's literally in the middle of a surgery and she's using all of those technical terms that you would expect from like a Grey's Anatomy medical type show, but it's not like she's just like, this is what I'm doing, and then she doesn't describe like if there's blood or if things are gushing or anything like that. And that's really where I get like creeped out. So she's very like, well, the main character, George, sorry, her name is Georgia. She goes by George. George is like she's a very logical way of looking at the world. So it would make sense, because this book it's in 3rd person, but it's kind of in her perspective. And so it would make sense that she would look at surgeries in the same way. So that's the only time it's been like a kind of like, we're put in a situation where it could potentially be gross. So I liked that. But I do have a better understanding of what this book's about. We follow our main 2 characters, Georgia and Joshua. The 2 of them work at this private practice that it's in the like suburbs of Charleston, if I'm correct on the state, but it's in this it's like a private practice, and they have collected a bunch of different doctors so that you can all come to the same facility for a bunch of stuff. She is a urologist, specifically a surgeon, and he is, I believe, just like a general practice doctor. It started off right away by telling us that this practice is kind of owned or run by a church. So I already knew things were about to get bad. And a bunch of the people who work at this private practice is people who go to this church. So religion plays a part, but it's not a huge part, I don't think. But the story starts because there's some rumors going on, and Joshua is very like private about his life, or private about some stuff, and like really wants to brush it off as like everything's fine. And she's like, I've heard rumors and something more is going on here, because like the thing that sparked this whole situation is she's leaving work, and he talks about having a meeting with someone in HR, and she's like, that's bizarre. And then she sees one of his patients leaving, who's a trans woman, and she and her partner, they're leaving, and she's like trying to wave at them because they're technically her patients as well. And so she was just trying to see what's going on, and they get like really angry at her and tell her to never talk to them again. And she's like, what is happening? And so through some stuff that she figures out and some news articles that have been going on, the people who are in charge of the practice have started sending out letters specifically to Joshua's patients, because he's the one who takes in more people from the queer community. But they start by just saying any trans client is not allowed to be at the practice anymore because of their moral code. And they start to extend that to just anybody in the queer community, which sucks because Joshua is gay. And so he obviously is taking in a lot of people from the queer community, and a lot of trans people come to him because they feel safe talking to him, just because of like his personality, but also because he's part of this community. And so the practice sends out these letters, and Joshua didn't know what was going on, and so he gets all these angry phone calls because it sounds like he's the one who's saying that he doesn't want them to be patients. And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. The only reason that people would get a letter like this is if Josh was leaving the practice and they were basically like, we can't take you anymore because the guy that you're seeing is no longer with us, which makes sense. But in this situation, they're just trying to get rid of anybody that they deem is not within their moral code. This gets obviously him very riled up, and so it's gotten to the point of like he's got a lawyer and they're trying to figure out what they can do, and he basically gets fired because of this, because they basically say like, you either have to test, like, here's your clients, tell them to leave, and if you don't, then you're gonna get fired. He's like, I'm not gonna do that. And so of course then they immediately give him his separation package and says, okay, bye. And so she's freaking out because A, it's her best friend and she hates seeing this. B, she knows this is so wrong. And C, some of those patients are hers, so like she's next, kind of. So a lot of trigger warnings so far. Obviously, like surgery, if you're not like a medical person, that's a part of the story, but it's not, like I said, not described, so you don't have to worry about it if you're squeamish like me. But obviously, like a lot of homophobia and transphobia. There's so much misgendering so far in this story, because when they, like the specific client that I was telling you about, our patient that like was trans and left, and she meets in the parking lot, obviously she refers to this woman as a she, so does Joshua, but when they talk to people in the higher ups, everyone is misgendering her, and it drove me nuts. I don't know where we're gonna go, you know? And so they're trying to figure out ways, because there's a few sneaky things that the board and HR have like snuck into some emails that people have like checked of like, yes, I've read this whole thing. And Georgia is like, no, I actually read everything and this isn't in it. And they're like, oh, but remember that email when you had to take that, like, you know, seminar online of like whatever, you know, like, you know how companies send out emails that like are about like, hey, here's some extra training that we need you to do, something like that. And so at the end of it, they had to like sign like, yes, if I want to keep being employed, I will check this. And in that, there's things like they can't sue, so they have to go to arbitration. And so that's a big thing. And so the lawyer's trying to figure out ways around this, and George is trying to help. And there's just some things like, it's already starting where like she hasn't done anything wrong, but Joshua has told her at least once, he's like, look, I'm all for you helping me. This is great. I love you. You're my best friend, but you're never going to understand what this feels like because you're not you're not gay. And so I'm wondering where that's going to go, because like I said, she's got some ideas of like, I think this could work. Let me figure it out and I'll get back to you. And I'm feeling like those things are going to like blow up in her face, and it's going to make their friendship, something's going to like, they're going to butt heads. But nothing like has happened yet. But it's kind of a mystery a little bit, in the sense of like, they're trying to figure out all the pieces, the two of them and the lawyer. And there's even one of the people who is on this board who does not agree with what they have done. He's like, I may not agree with the lifestyle, but like, we can't discriminate against patients. That's just wrong. And he's not a good guy. So it's funny to see him in this situation. And so they're all trying to like figure out ways to help Jonah, because he's the first one that this has happened to, but like, this is going to just explode within this practice. So far, so good. I'm actually really enjoying it. I plowed through like 30% of this book last night. So yes, I do have the audiobook, but like, I was in bed with my Kindle, because I have it on my Kindle, like I mentioned, physically reading my Kindle and listening at the same time. And I was very sucked in, and I had to like make myself stop because I needed to go to bed. So I'm thinking this one's going to be a really quick second half, but I just really enjoy these characters, and I'm curious what's going to happen, you know? Like, I'm stressed for them because the situation is clearly not ideal and is like the worst situation they could be in. And like this, some of the stuff that the people on the board, like when they were in the meeting where Joshua got fired, he like, some of the stuff that the board was saying, I just like wanted to come through the pages and punch them in the face. So there was a couple people here that like you really don't like. And I mean, you're not supposed to like a lot of the people who are on this board, but like there's a couple of people who really stick out. So there's some stuff. There is some stuff in this book, but I'm liking it. And I think even if there was more described medical talk, I think I would still enjoy it, because like, The point of the story is not to watch them have all these surgeries. The point of the story is they just happen to be doctors in this situation. And the focus is the situation, which has nothing to do with surgery. So that's good. We're doing good. So I'm so glad so far. Knock on wood. That wasn't wood. There we go. I'm liking it. So I have hopes for the rest of the story. I'm stressed for them because I don't know what's going to happen, and some stuff has come out about people's past, and there's also a love interest that I actually like a lot. So I'm wondering if he's going to play a big part of this as well, or if he's just going to be like a sounding board for Georgia. I don't know. I love it. So far, so good. This is very promising. Hello. As you can see, we're in a very peculiar place, and that is because I'm making lunch. And I wanted to come talk to you about my thoughts, because I finished the book last night. Well, technically this morning. It was very, very early this morning. But I finished it. And in a twist of fate, y'all, I gave it 5 stars. Who is she? So, is this book perfect? No. But I had so much enjoyment from the second half of this book that all of those imperfections, I felt like they didn't impact me, I guess. What am I talking about? Well, the author did have an author's note at the very end of the book, which I found really interesting because the author herself is a medical professional. I don't know what she does, if she's actually like a doctor or a surgeon or what, but she does have a medical background. So all the medical side of things, fascinating. She's also presents herself, I'm not sure how accurate this is, like I don't know what she actually identifies as, but she presents herself as a cis straight woman. And so having the story about trans rights from a cis straight woman's perspective is hard to do, which is why I thought the author's note was so well done, because she kind of talked about why she wanted to write the story, why this was so important for her to tell, and also why, like, how she tried to do it in the best way that she could. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole once I was done, and I read a bunch of Goodreads reviews of this, and a lot of people really enjoyed it, and a lot of people had issues with some of the conversations and the fact that this trans story was told from a white cis woman's perspective. But I think because of the author, that was the best that she could do. I mean, she would have gotten so much hate, and also it's not appropriate if she had written from like a trans person's perspective, or even from, and I realized this yesterday when I was talking to you, I kept saying Joshua. His name is Jonah. I don't know where I got Joshua from, which explains his nickname, which is Jones. And I was just like, what is this nickname she has for him? My brain. Anyway, but if she had written it from his perspective, it still wouldn't have been a good perspective, because she's, first off, a straight woman writing from a gay man's perspective. So like that just really wouldn't have worked. So yes, I'm sure because of that, some of these issues were tackled maybe a little bit differently. I am cis, so like obviously I will have a different opinion and perspective than a trans person would when they are kind of like reading the story. But I think because she presented Georgia as this very logical person, the way that she handled situations made sense for the character that she was portraying. But the second half of the story, when I tell you, took a turn. It took a turn. So trigger warnings for like literally everything. Like I mentioned surgery and homophobia and transphobia, because they misgender, and also there's a few slurs for gay men in this story, including the guy who, like, Jonah, he even like uses one as like a joke. And then there is sexual assault in this book. There is talks of suicide in this book. I made a whole list. I'm trying to remember everything that was on it. Drug abuse was in this book. Like literally everything under the sun was in this book. And it's not an easy book to read. The second half is rough, but it kept me on my toes, like the edge of my seat. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. There's this whole mystery with them trying to figure out what actually happened, because they keep hinting, this board keeps hinting that there's other stuff as to why Jonah got fired. And they couldn't actually like fire him for just being gay like they wanted to, and for having trans clients or patients. And so it was, there's other stuff going on, and there's a mystery surrounding that. And then we figure out some stuff about Georgia and Jonah and how they played into it. There is a weird romance. Like, I like Mark. He's a nice guy, but I can see a lot of people, when I looked at Goodreads reviews, the biggest issue people had with this story was the weird romance and how it started, because it does feel a little bizarre. And they're like meet cute moment. I put that in quotations because it's not really meet cute at all. And it was a very interesting way, but I liked it because it gave like growth to her character. So, like I said, it's not perfect. It's a rough story to tell. And even though the catalyst of it is this like trans rights issue, it really follows the story of Jonah and from Georgia's perspective, and how she's trying to get him to get his job back, and whether or not she's a good ally. And like, you as the reader are supposed to, I think, figure that out for yourself. So with all that being said, like I said, I enjoyed it so much that it got 5 stars, which is unheard of. I realized when I finished my last update with you guys, I didn't tell you what I was reading next, but that's okay, because I picked up The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. We're doing it. We're doing the big chunker, and I'm just about halfway. It looks like I'm not. It looks like I'm a little bit more than halfway, but according to my audiobook and everything, I'm halfway. And it's probably a good thing I didn't come to you at the beginning, because I didn't have any idea what this book was about, except for the fact that there was an East and a West, and it was high fantasy, and there was supposed to be a female romance, or there was supposed to be queer representation. Let me phrase it that way. But now that I'm halfway through, I still don't have a good idea. I know the plot, I know what I'm reading, but I don't know how to explain it to you, I guess is where I'm at. I started this book where I wouldn't listen to the audiobook without physically having the book in front of me so I could follow along, and because I didn't want to miss anything. I thought there was going to be a lot of really big world building things that we were going to have in the very beginning of this book, and I didn't want to kind of zone out and miss it, and therefore not enjoy this book because of that. However, that made me incredibly confused for a lot of the story. So once I kind of had a general idea of what was going on, I stopped doing that, and I have had the audiobook on while I've been doing other things. I have been focusing, like, it is a pretty epic world, so you need to have like some sort of concentration when you're reading. So I have been doing that, but like, I've let some of the world building things kind of wash over me, because I was so focused on making sure I didn't miss any details that I wasn't enjoying the reading experience. And I've much more having kind of let myself just read for the sake of reading, or listen for the sake of the story and the plot and the characters, and not so focused on the world itself and the magic system, has been much better experience. So I'm really enjoying this. It's, from what I can tell you, it's very fantastical. It follows 4 perspectives. And what I liked about this book is there's a glossary in the back where it gives you not only like some words that are specific to this world, there's an entire cast of characters, and they're separated by like east, west, there's some south in here, and then there's a little bit of a timeline for the historical events, if you will. So I like that, because I can always kind of like jump back and be like, oh, who is that person again? And if I have any questions, I can just scroll to the back here and look it up. The 4 people we're following, I'm looking it up because I know I'm going to get them wrong. So the first one that we see is a girl named Tane, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm not going to pronounce any of these right, just for the record. She was drafted as a kid into the House of Learning, and now she's training to be a guard with the dragon. And so you've got her story, and she starts basically finding this guy on the beach, and she's out when she's not supposed to be out the night before her kind of like big trial. And she finds him, and instead of like turning him over or killing him because he's an outsider, and there's this whole thing about like a red plague that's going around, she brings him to a friend, and they like secretly get him to this other guy, who is another person that we're following, who is called Roos, and he's an alchemist, and he has been sent to this island as like punishment because he didn't do something for the queen. And we find out later there's a lot more to it than just that, but like he tried to do something for the queen and it didn't work or something like that, and so he's been basically like sent to this island for the rest of his days. And you've got him. So he's dealing with the fact that there's this stranger in his house, and he's afraid that he's going to get caught, because if he gets caught, he'll get killed, because if anybody who's new to this island could bring this like red plague thing. So you've got the two of them. Those are, I think, the east people. And then the two west ones, you've got, she goes by Ede. That's not her full name, but she's basically part of this secret society called the Priory of the Orange Tree, and they are sent to like out to, they have magic, and they can like are sent out on missions, and her mission has been this queen, and to protect her. So she's like one of her ladies in waiting, kind of, not quite that high up, a little bit lower than that, and it's her kind of situation is set in this matriarchal society where the women rule, and so she is being pressured to get married so that she can produce an heir, but she's producing a female heir. And so it's very like reminiscent of historical like England, like kind of what you would expect from our history across the world, of like women got married and their sole purpose was to have an heir, whereas that's not her sole purpose, but like that's her big thing, is like she needs to have a daughter so that she can have an heir, but she's also like ruling this country. So you've got Ede, and she gets really close with this queen, and it's her story of kind of like protecting the queen, but also kind of keeping her identity secret, because she's like really good with the blade and has magic, and like all of those things are no-nos. And then the other one that we follow is this guy named Loth, who has been sent away, and he's really, really close with the queen, and one of the queen's ladies in waiting, like the higher up, I think they're called like bedchamber maidens or something. I can't remember exactly what they're called, but they're basically like the women who are like her close circle. They dress her, they stay up with her to make sure that she is protected, like things like that. And he is the brother of one of these women, but has also been really, really close with the queen. And there's this guy that is sending people away if they get too close to the queen, and he was just one of them. They were brother and sister, like there wasn't anything like romantic going on, but he basically gets sent away on this mission to another country to basically like broker peace. And he's like, yep, this was this guy's way of basically like, I got too close, so he sent me away. And so he and his best friend Kit, I think his name's Kit, go off on this thing. Where I'm at, I haven't heard from him in a hot second, so I don't know what's going on with him. But you basically follow these four perspectives in this like east versus west conflict. And it's incredibly complex, but I am really enjoying it. So like I said, I was really, really confused at the beginning. Like the world building, the magic system, there's a lot of information thrown at you, and it was just way too much to process. So I was focusing too much on that. And then once I let that kind of go, I really enjoyed the story. But on the reverse side of it, the plot is fine. Like there's not a whole lot plot-wise. I mean, there is now that we've gotten into it. It took me like 200 pages to really get invested, which sounds like a lot, except for you have to remember that this book is 800 pages. So that's about a fourth of the story, which is pretty, that happens sometimes for me, is it takes a while. Sometimes it even takes halfway for me to get really invested in the story. But about 200 pages in is when I started to really see kind of like the individual plot lines. And there's definitely two characters, Ede and Tane, are the ones that I enjoy the most. Just because I think their stories are the most interesting. Ede specifically, like anytime it's her story, I get really excited. But the characters are so good, which is new for me, because you guys know I'm a plot person. I am all about the plot, and if the characters are okay, but the plot is amazing, I can still enjoy a story. But like, the characters make this story, and there's a ton of them. And there's people that I'm sure are important, and they went over my head because I'm not focusing on them. I'm focusing on the main four. And it's very interesting. I don't know where we're going to go. It's like a one and done thing. I mean, thank goodness this is thick, but like it's a one and done story. I mean, I know there's a prequel, but when she wrote this, it was supposed to be a standalone. So I don't know. I don't know really what's happening, but I'm enjoying it, and I'm finding myself flying through it. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but I definitely like sectioned off this book so that I could finish it in like a week or so, and I've basically read 3 days sections today. So I definitely am really enjoying it. I still have a lot to go, but it is keeping my attention, and I like it. It's not going to be a 5-star unless something dramatic happens, but even then I'm still not sure it's ever going to be a 5-star, and honestly I don't think I'm ever going to reread this. The moral of the story is I am enjoying it, but I can't tell you why. Not because it's a spoiler, but because I genuinely cannot pinpoint what specifically I'm enjoying about this. I'm thinking it might be the characters, but like the plot now is a little all over the place. But like I said, I have a character that I'm rooting for, and so I'm focusing a lot on her plot, and I really enjoy that section when we talk to her about stuff. So I don't know. I don't know where this is going to go. Oh, also the like queer representation that I've seen, there's been a male-male romance from one of the main 4 that has been mentioned, like a past romance, and then the queen has been with both men and women, so I'm thinking she's bi. But there's a female-female romance ish with her, and so there's definitely a lot of representation, and it's just like thrown at you like it's super normal, which I really appreciated, because especially in like these historical inspired fantasy worlds, any sort of queer representation or romance would probably be looked on a little bit differently. But I like the fact that this is just a very normal thing, and it's very well known that the queen takes women to bed, and that's just like a thing that happens. The male-male romance that's mentioned is a secret romance, but only because of the status difference between the 2 guys. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're both dudes. It has to do with the fact that one of them is like this super highborn noble guy, and one is like a lower class person in this world. So that's been fun to see. So yeah, I feel like I'm not gonna have a lot of thoughts on this, mostly because like I'm enjoying my time, but I don't like know what to say about it. So I'll come back to you obviously when I have finished it, but I've made it halfway, and I've only been reading this for probably about a week. And those sections really helped. So the individual who told me of that, you sectioned the book when you read it, I think it was in my TBR. Smart. Hello. It is a couple of days, only a couple of days later, and I have officially finished The Priory of the Orange Tree. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars, which is pretty, I think, on brand for what my experience was. I think this would not have gotten higher than a low 4-star, I think is where I'm at. I don't have a lot of stuff to add to what I said when I came to at the halfway point. The characters still is what drove this book for me. There was some plot stuff that came into the story. The one character, Ede, which was the perspective that like I enjoyed the most, she kind of took, like that perspective kind of took center stage a little bit. I think she was like the driving force of this book, but it was kind of cool because some of the perspectives crossed paths a little bit, which I wasn't sure if we were going to get or not, to be honest. But there's a couple of things that happened at the very, very end. Like the last line of this person's perspective hinted at something, and then that was it. We got no explanation. So I don't know if I missed something, but like I had a couple of endings that I didn't understand. This was a one and done. Like there is a sequel. It's actually a prequel. There is a prequel to this book, which follows 4 other women's perspectives before the events of this book, but there's nothing after. So it was almost like there was an open end, but I didn't understand the open end. And there's a character, like something happened to them, and I was like, did they die? Are they alive? I don't actually know. So I was very confused by some stuff. But I think my biggest critique of this book is that there's just too much in general. The plot is not crazy intricate, so the plot part of it was fine. I mean, yes, it kind of kept going and it would get lost and it would come back. And I think there's a way to make this into multiple books if you really wanted to. But the plot itself was fine. There was way too many characters. I mean, I stopped paying attention to people being introduced because, like, even with the glossary, like, I barely looked at the glossary, to be honest, because they would, like, introduce someone and, like, throw a name at you just, like, oddball name that like didn't mean anything, and then it wouldn't come back. It was like, why are we introducing this person and giving them a name, like a full-on name, not just like, this is Claire. It was like, this is Claire of the house of blah 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 blah, and like you gave like a whole thing for them, but like they didn't come back. Then also like there were people who would show up at the beginning and then like not be there for a while and then show up at the end, and like I didn't recognize their names when they came back. So like there's just so many characters, and there's a lot of world building and magic system building that this author had to do, which I get, but some of it just felt excessive. And this author had created this gigantic, intricate world and wanted to tell you every single detail about it, but you don't, as the reader, need to know every single detail about it. So, while I still loved the story itself, and I liked the characters, and I liked seeing where we were going with it, I don't think I'm going to pick up the other one. Like, if it's the same size as this one, like it's a chunker. And this, I feel very accomplished that I finished it. I don't know, maybe it's just because like I'm not the biggest adult epic high fantasy reader, and maybe someone who is used to these big complex worlds wouldn't bat an eye at some of the stuff that was happening. But there was just like so much information given to you that I felt wasn't needed for the story. So it was, I'll admit, like there's definitely some things that are important, but it's like it would give you like some random history, and I'm like, but why? Why are we talking about this thing that's not important and isn't coming back at any point? So there was just a lot. I feel like you could have cut the story way down. I don't know, but I did it, and it got 3.5, which is still a pretty decent rating. The big chunker of the book, or of this video, is done, and I feel very accomplished. So, what does this mean? We have one book left, which is a novella, and this one is called Upright Women Wanted, and the reason it's on this list and in this video is because it's a Western. Now, when I made this list, I had no interest in Westerns. Now I've read a few historical romances that are like Western historical romances that I have enjoyed. But as a whole, Western still is a category that I'm such a novice at, and like is not something that is going to draw me in unless it's by an author that I enjoy. So it's a novella, and it's only like 150 something pages, and the audiobook is like 3 hours long. And so at my speed, we're looking at 2 hours maybe. So I'm going to listen to that one today, and I'm probably going to finish it today. So I'm just going to come back to you when I finish it instead of trying to find a halfway point, because it's so short. I feel like I'm not going to have a lot to say at the halfway point that I wouldn't say at the end. So that's the next one. I believe this is a queer romance as well, which I'm excited about to see in a older kind of Western setting. Also, Goodreads says that this is a fantasy, which I didn't know going in, so we'll see about that. And I am excited because I don't really, like, I know there's going to be more to it. I know it's about librarians. I know that much. Set in like a Western setting. That's about as far as I got. So I'm excited to see that side of the story, but I don't really know what we're going to get with that. It's been a couple of days since I came to you last, and I have finished the last book, which was the Upright Women Wanted book, and I actually finished it on the day that I came to you last to tell you that I was probably going to finish it, but I needed some time to process my thoughts, I think, because there was some there were some twists that happened at the end of the book, and I just needed time to process, like not in a bad way, I just needed to process. I was giving it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I went in a little dubious about it because with novellas, they either work really, really well or don't work at all for me. And I'm never sure which one I'm going to get because they're so short. I have a hard time sometimes connecting to the characters and the world and everything like that. So there have been some novellas that I haven't loved, but then there's been some novellas like the Wayward Children series that I have loved. This one obviously stood on the side of I loved it. For such a short book, did such a good job of creating characters that I was able to connect with and kind of understand, and then also having a plot that wasn't too complex. It didn't feel like cramped because it was so short of a book, but it also didn't feel like there was no plot because it was so short. Like it felt very fleshed out as far as the plot goes and the characters and everything. So I loved this. It basically follows our main character, Esther, and it's in this kind of dystopian Western world where the government, or their version of the government, is heavily involved. And so, like, even to the point of they can restrict the reading materials that you can have. And so it follows Esther, whose best friend slash person she might have been in love with, Beatrice, gets hanged at the very beginning of the book. I mean, we don't see it. She just kind of talks about how it had happened because of, you know, any sort of LGBTQ plus queer anything is not okay in this world. And there's some like rebellion and some groups that are trying to stop that. There's also maybe a war going on. I'm not 100% sure about that one. But Esther's father is pretty high up in the government, I believe. He has like this fancy title, so I'm not 100% sure what he does. But she goes through this horrible thing with her best friend, and so she decides to run away because she has been taught her whole life that like having feelings for like women and someone who is not a dude is a no-no. Also, her dad has decided that she is going to be is going to be engaged and marry this man, and she's like, I can't stand him, he's gross. So there's also that. But she decides to run away with the librarians, who are these three individuals who travel from town to town. Exactly what it sounds like. They bring books that have been requested. They take books back that people have read since the last time they were there. And it's literally just this caravan that like travels around and does what you would expect a library to do. But when she shows up and kind of hides herself with these librarians, she's like, they're, you know, like they work with these, what is approved as far as reading materials go, so they must be morally correct according to the society. And she later finds out that one of them is non-binary and the other two are in a female-female relationship. So she's kind of relearning stuff. And there's a lot more to it than that, which I feel like is surprising for such a short story, but like there is some rebellion, there is some fighting, there is some climactic moments, some people, and at the end, like you're kind of confused, which is why I was like I was on the fence for most of this book. If I loved the story, I loved the characters, but I wasn't really sure what I was feeling about it because I felt very confused by the world itself. But you're kind of supposed to, and then at the end, everything is made clear and everything kind of clicks into place. So I adored this book. I adored the relationships. I adored the representation. I loved watching our main character kind of like figure herself out a little bit. Like she always knew she had these feelings, but now she's in a place where she can accept those about her, and there are other people out there, and that it's not necessarily a bad thing. And so she has all of those moments, which I really liked seeing her go through that. There's a little bit of a romance with her, not much, because again, she just watched the last person she fell in love with die. So she is going through some stuff, but you see like the starts of something. So like I would love to see at some point in the future a full-length fleshed out version of this world, because I think it's fascinating. So yeah, everything was paced really, really well, and nothing felt rushed, nothing felt not fleshed out. It was just a really fun story, and there's a lot more to it. So like the fact that it was a Western and a novella were the reasons that I was like, I don't really know about this, but it became just this much grander story that kind of kept me reading. So loved it, gave it 4 stars. So that brings us to the end of this experiment. We had 4 books, and I think the lowest rated book was Priory, which I gave 3.5, and that's still pretty good. The rest of them were 4s, and then I even gave a 5-star to a book about medicine and doctors and surgery. What crazy. So, what have I taken away from this experiment? Am I going to pick up every single book that interests me, if it's about surgery, if it's a high epic fantasy, if it's, you know, insert whatever you want? No, those are still topics that don't interest me. But if there's something else about the story that does interest me, or something else that I've heard other people talk about that does interest me about a story, then it might be worth my time, which is kind of what I was wondering about with this when I came up with this idea such a long time ago, was like all of these books should not work. There's something in them that should not make me like them, but there's also something in it that maybe should make me like them. So like testing my reading boundaries here, I guess. And I am so glad I did this because I've read some books that I've had on my TBR for such a long time. And also I've tried some new things. I found some newer authors that maybe I can investigate and see if there's other books by these authors that I might want to try out at some point. And then also like getting over the fear of a big book, for example. Like that book is huge and it scares the crap out of me, but I was able to do it. So that's my grand experiment. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm so sorry it took me 2 years to do, but I did it. And I really hope that you guys enjoy. Please let me know, as always, if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video or in this vlog, but also if there's a book out there that's somewhat similar to this idea, that there's something in it that you don't like, but maybe there's something in it that you do like, let me know down below. Or if you have opinion, like some book recommendations based on what I've said in this video, obviously leave those linked down below as well. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'll be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there as well as other fun bookish links, so go check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!